Joining us now is Kathy Deck. She's an economist and director of the Center for Business and Economic Research at the University of Arkansas's Walton College of Business. For all of you keeping score with acronyms, that is the UAWCOBCBER. Did I get that right, Kathy?
That was everything.
Well, welcome to the program. It's good to have you back on with us.
Thank you so much, Roby.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening generally and overall in the Arkansas economy. You obviously have given your recent quarterly business analysis. Tell me, what are your overall impressions of what we're seeing right now?
Well, when you look at the Arkansas economy, we were so fortunate throughout 2008 to not fully feel the effects of the national downturn. And so that led a lot of folks to talk about Arkansas as being recession-proof, for example. But I think when you look at what has happened in 2009, it becomes readily apparent that Arkansas is no longer anywhere near recession-proof, although we continue to have much, much better performance economically-wise than the national economy. So when you think about where Arkansas is in terms of unemployment, in terms of layoffs, in terms of housing prices, again, the effects of the economic downturn have been much, much more muted in Arkansas, but we're on the same trend with the nation. And so until we see the recovery begin to take hold in the United States, it's unlikely that we're going to see dramatic improvement in Arkansas itself.
Let's talk about some individual kind of components that you look at when you're preparing your analysis here. Let's talk first about sales tax collections at the state and at the local level in some different pockets of the state. That's a reflection of consumer spending by and large, which is a huge component of the overall economy. Those numbers have been kind of down in some areas, and then we've also seen recently retailer reports have not been very strong. Is it bad news in that sector right now for consumer spending?
Well, we know that consumer spending is the real challenge of this downturn. Consumers have been hit from every direction. Their homes are not worth as much as they were. Their stock market portfolios have taken significant hits. And worst of all, they're worried about losing their jobs. When they look around at the economy, you can tell that consumers really are thinking that the situation is much, much worse than it was a few years ago, and the level of uncertainty is much higher. And that does manifest itself in the sales tax numbers that we see. That directly impacts communities. Local governments get a great deal of money from sales tax revenues. And of course, at the state level, we've seen that manifest itself as well. The bad news is that consumer spending is likely to remain muted for some time, simply because the things that lead to higher consumer spending are unlikely to recover quickly. Housing prices don't look like they're going to make a dramatic recovery anytime soon, and although we've seen a lot of improvement in the stock market from its lows, there's no sense that it's going to break out in the near future.
And another reason we may not see a quick rebound in consumer spending is because we still have some pretty high levels of unemployment at the state level and for sure nationally. Tell me, what are the unemployment figures telling us at this time? When you kind of read them as tea leaves, what do they tell you about what does it tell you about the economy?
Well, when you look at the unemployment numbers, again, you want to compare yourself to yourself, and then you want to compare yourself to everybody else. So when Arkansas, on average, looks at the rest of the nation, we look at our unemployment rates, we say, great, gosh, we really are weathering this okay compared to some of our neighbors and friends. But when we compare our own performance to the good years, we can see that the unemployment numbers have significantly increased. And then just kind of a steady barrage of bad news, announcements, layoffs in jobs across sectors, obviously manufacturing being the hardest hit, but again, it's hard to think of a sector that has not been dramatically affected by this downturn, and that's really what differentiates it. It's been so broad-based.
You touched on manufacturing. I had a specific question in mind before we started this interview about manufacturing. We've seen about 20,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector lost since about January of 2008. Well, what do you think has to happen, or can that sector ever rebound to the levels that we've seen it at in the past?
Manufacturing will not rebound to the levels that we've seen it in the past. And it's not so much because of globalization or the economic downturn in particular, this trend has been going on for the last 30 years. We have seen manufacturing become much, much less labor intensive. That is, that you just don't need as many people to make the same amount of stuff anymore. And of course, when you enter an economic downturn like this, the trend is exacerbated. We see a lot of economically based decisions being made, and of course the layoffs recently are a result of that. But really, again, this is part of a trend that's been going on forever and ever. And so we need to be thinking about ways we can diversify our economy into the other sectors of the economy that are likely to be growth sectors. Keeping in mind, it doesn't mean manufacturing is going to go away entirely. Of course not. It never will. We will still need to make things. But manufacturing cannot be the sector where we put all of our hopes and dreams.
The Northwest Arkansas economy was particularly hit hard in the housing and the construction sectors over the last several months, last year and a half, 2 years. We got some good news this past week with the May housing numbers. There seems to be some real stabilization up in the Northwest sector of the state. I don't want to read too much into just 1 month's report, but do you think that we are seeing a trend here?
Well, I'm always cautious about calling a trend with one data point. And of course, the April numbers were an improvement as well. So we have 2 data points. But I think May was special for a variety of reasons. May is really the beginning of the house buying season. And if you look at the overall economic conditions in May, they were very, very conducive to buying residential housing. You had interest rates at levels that we haven't seen in terms of the availability of mortgages to the consumers who could qualify for them. They could get fantastic rates. We had seen prices fall substantially, and if you remember in May, it was kind of in the middle of the rebound in the stock market. There was a kind of those green shoots of optimism about the recession. And so I think that May was a particularly good month. And I'm a little nervous that as we look at the June and July numbers, when the mortgage rates weren't quite as attractive, that might really take a little bit of the edge off.
Pulling a little bit more to big picture here, we've seen the federal government make a lot of moves over the last year in terms of stimulus, encouraging investment, doing things to try to prop up the economy. Are we at a point now where we just need to wait for the market forces to do their natural thing, or do you think that there is going to be some push for more economic stimulation, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, the stimulus, as we all know, takes time to make its way through the economy. And one of the discussions that's always taken place throughout history as we look at stimulus packages is they often hit just as the economic recovery is beginning on its own. In terms of inventories, in terms of whatever. Certainly with the tepid outlook, the stimulus is necessary, and as it really does hit the economy in the third and fourth and first quarters in the future, we're really going to see the impact of that in the state and then across the nation as well. We are certainly hearing calls for a second stimulus package based on the idea that what the initial stimulus package had was designed for unemployment rates that we've already surpassed. I think that there will definitely be a wait and see kind of attitude as to in the government about what the effects of the stimulus are once it actually has gotten out there, and then what the rest of the world is doing economically without the stimulus. Again, as we go forward, we have to see whether we're able to sustain any kind of momentum, particularly in the jobs market.
Let's look into your crystal ball. I know you don't do a lot of prediction and outlook into the future, but what do you see kind of trending? What are some things that we should be keeping our eyes on in terms of things to watch?
Well, you always want to look at those kind of leading indicators. And so as much as I love employment is not a leading indicator. It's going to be the last thing to come along out of this recession. So I think we need to be looking at inventory levels. I think we need to be looking at both inventory levels in physical goods, but also inventories in things like houses and automobiles. All of that kind of things will tell us how much we're recovering. We need to be watching those consumer expenditure numbers. We need to be looking at consumer sentiment. All of those are the kind of leading indicators that we can use to get a sense of what's coming forward. We know that the consumer is not going to be able to lead us out of this recession as effectively as they have in the past. So the question then becomes what's going to drive this? And so we always have to be looking to innovation. What is that next great idea that we don't have any idea about right now?
It's to hire more economists. That's
hire more economists. That's the innovation that's desperately needed. So.
All right, Kathy Deck, she's the director of the Center for Business and Economic Research at the Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas. As always, we appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you so much, Roby.
We're back with more right after this.